Since I know that I'm going to be using 2 skeins of yarn, I'm going to go ahead and attach the end of this skein, which is the outside strand, to the beginning of this second skein, which is the inside skein. So what I've come up with is I'm going to take this side, I'm going to fold in the rough edge like this, just about 2 inches. So I'm going to fold it to the inside. Then I'm going to take this is the this strand from the second ball, and this came from the inside of this ball, and I'm going to stick that inside of the first strand like this. Then I have a nice smooth edge there. Then I have a strand of worsted weight yarn on a yarn needle, and all I'm going to do is weave this across, going through both thicknesses. So just do that. I'm going to leave that end right there, and then I'm going to come back on the other side. I'm just going to turn this over, and I'm just going to weave this back to the other side, just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to tie that with the beginning really good, but I don't want to pull too tight because it's just woven in there, and I don't want it to pull together. So if I put a lot of knots in there, okay, that's good. Then I'm just going to take this end and I'm going to weave it back into the center of the yarn like that. Okay, then all I got to do is cut this. I cut flat so I don't cut into it, and then I cut this little end here because I knotted it so many times. So there I have the yarn joined together. You're not going to see this when the scarf is complete. So now I don't have to worry about tying on the strand while I'm in the middle of the project. I measured off 1.5 yards for my long tail, and the remaining yarn is my working yarn. So my long tail is going to be over on this side, and at the 1.5 yard mark I'm going to make a slip knot. So to make a slip knot, there's several ways to do it, but this is how I do it. You make a loop like this, the top strand goes to the back, and then you pull that back strand forward. It kind of looks like a little pretzel there. So you pull that forward, and you'll notice there's a knot side and then there's a slip side. So you want to pull the knot side not too tight, and then pull the slip side on the slip side like this to make it big enough to fit over your hand so that it can go onto your arm. So this will count as your first stitch right here. I don't know why I have all these little tiny things that show up on high definition. Okay, so we need to just cast on 2 more stitches for the scarf. So to do that, I've got my strands here. I'm just going to go like this and pick those up like this. Now I just have 2 strands draped over my hand. And I'm going to go here, go underneath this strand, and pick up this strand and put it on my hand, and then slide it down to my arm. And that's how you cast on 1 stitch. So then you tighten these 2 strands here. You don't want it super tight, just like that. So now I have 2 stitches on my arm. Okay, now the next one, you just pick this up. You have 2 strands there. You go on this side of that strand, pick up this strand off the other side of your hand, and put your hand through there, just like that. And then you can pull. See, it's kind of drapey there, so you just pull the 2 strands to tighten it up, so it should look like that underneath. Well, this should be a little bit tighter like this. Okay, so now I've casted on 3 stitches. Now I don't need this tail anymore, and I probably could have gotten away with just over 1 yard. I tried this with 1 yard and it wasn't enough, so that's why I went with 1.5 yards. So I won't be needing that anymore. And now I'll show you how to do row 1. So row 1, the side that has the loops on it, I'll be holding the working yarn in that hand, and all you do is slide this off, drop that loop down onto the working yarn, and then just take that loop and put it on the opposite arm and tighten that loop that you just made, like that. It'll still tighten with the long tail too. Okay, so this strand goes back over here. Just simply pull this off there and slide that over to your opposite hand. And then pull this, pull on the working yarn. Okay, back to this hand, slide this loop off, and then no twisting or anything, you just slide it off and put it over here. So that's the end. That's how you do row 1. And if you pull it out, you see the little knitting stitches right there. I actually am having a lot of fun doing these arm knitting projects. I really enjoy them. Okay, so hold this, drop this loop off onto the working yarn, and just bring your other hand in and put the loop over there. And then tighten. You always want to tighten. So the working yarn goes back over here. Take this loop off your arm, put that loop, the new loop, over on the opposite hand and pull. Take this over here, drop this strand onto the working yarn, take the new loop and put it on the opposite hand. So that is row 2. So if you pull this out, you see more knitting stitches. So let me show you that again. Hold the working yarn here, drop the loop over, and take the new loop and put it on your opposite hand and pull these loops. Hold the yarn here, pull this one over, take the new loop and slide it over to the opposite hand. Hold the yarn here, take this loop over, and push it onto the opposite hand. So that's the end of row 3. So now row 4, hold this here, slide this off, new loop goes over here, and then pull this tight. Hold the working yarn here, slide the next loop off, the next stitch, and push it onto your other arm, and then tighten it around your arm. Hold it here, pull this off, and tighten it, and push it onto your arm and tighten. So you just keep going until you get down near the end. And because I started with 1.5 yards at the beginning for my long tail, when you use up both skeins until you have 1.5 yards left, that's how long you're going to need that end strand to be for binding off. So make sure that you stop before you run out of yarn, and make sure that you have at least 1.5 yards at the end. And then I'll come back on video. I'm going to finish my scarf, and then I'll show you how to bind off. So I've finished the 2 skeins of yarn, and this is how long my cowl is. And I have just about 1.5 yards of the yarn left, so now it's time to bind off. And when you get ready to bind off, it doesn't matter which side the loops are on. So it just so happened that I ended over here with the loops. So to bind off, I'm just going to work my row like I'm used to, and there'll just be one little change at the end. So I need my working strand here. I'm going to pull the first loop off my arm, and then I'm going to drop that loop onto the working yarn and put that strand over on the opposite hand. I'm still pulling, tightening every loop. So now I'm going to put this back over here on the working hand, and then I'm going to pull that loop off, drop it, and push that over onto the opposite hand right there. And then I'm going to pull. Now when I've got 2 loops here, I'm going to take the first loop that I pulled off and pull it over the second loop that I pulled off, and just let that drop down. And that's a bound off stitch. Now I'm going to go back over here, put my yarn in here, in this hand, pull the last loop off, slide that over here, and if you guessed this move, you'd be right. So I'm just going to take the previous loop and move it over the loop I just took off, and that's it. That's how you bind it off. And then you hold on to that last loop. You don't want to drop that because it would all unravel. You take the rest of the strand right here, and all you do is open that up just like this and pass it through that loop. And if you pull that, then that locks it right there. And if you look on that bind off, you'll see like a row of loops there. So you'll have 3 loops there. And when you go back over to the beginning, I'm going to tuck all this in there. When you go back to the beginning and you pull that row out a little bit like that, you'll see that you have 3 loops from your cast on. So what you want to do is take either strand here, and if you want to connect these two, you could wear this as a scarf, and maybe you want to fringe this. You could actually bind off earlier so you have more for a fringe, but it look really cute to just fringe the scarf. Or you can make it go in one big circle like this and sew it together like this. Or you could twist this one time to give it more of a you know, just a, I don't know, just a different look. You could twist it several times actually, or you could just wait and this will twist around your neck one time. So anyway, that's how you make it. And to sew these together, you could just use your hands because this is so thick. You could use either one. And the opposite one you want to feed back into the stitches. That's what I recommend. And just feed it in maybe about 8 inches. I would feed it back and then maybe wind this around a couple of times and then into there, and then just at some point just cut that end. Okay, there. And then here you would just match the 3 stitches together. So you take that end and bring it through 2 strands of this side and just bring that through like that, and then you go get 2 strands from the next stitch right here and you bring that through there. It doesn't have to be exact because you're not going to see that. And see, I've got 2 strands right here in the center, so I'm going to push that through there. And then this yarn is really soft. It's great. Then I'm going to take 2 strands on the outside over here. Come back over this side. Now I'm going to take the corner over here. That's my slip knot right there. And I'm just going to put this through the first chain of my slip knot. There. So that's a good joining. You can't really see it. And then I'll just weave this back in also. So that's how you arm knit this beautiful cowl using Couture Jazz yarn from Premier. The links to everything will be listed below, and I want to thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe to our channel.